Welcome to August 8th, 2024. It is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. I am Eric Balkman from the Fantasy Football Players Championship, the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. You can follow me on the X at Eric Balkman and connect with me there. Joined tonight by the real NFL guru. No, not just in name, but actually in stature as well. At the real NFL guru on the X, it is Anthony Cervino from RotoWire. Anthony, welcome aboard tonight,
What's going on? Happy to be here.
It's exciting to have you on because we don't often get too many gurus on the show, but we're getting a real life
self-proclaimed.
Well, self-proclaimed or not, it is proclaimed. Somebody is proclaiming it. Just happens to be you, but that's okay. Don't forget that the FFPC is the home of the fastest filling drafts right now. Fantasy Pros Championship and the FFPC main event, slow and live drafts going on, filling up very fast right now. $1 million grand prize in both of them. Don't forget about the FFPC Superflex Best Ball Tournament. Just $35 to enter. And, of course, you can win $100,000 of that. Empire Leagues and Dynasty League. MyFFPC.com is where to go for that. Anthony, let's take a swing around the NFL. I know we got some preseason action tonight. I'll try to keep us updated if anything interesting happens. But not everybody is playing in the preseason. One of those players is Derrick Henry. Carmen Wolfe of the NFL Network said that he is not going to see any preseason action. This is interesting because Henry, for the first time in his career, is on a new team. We will not see meaningful football of Derrick Henry in a Ravens uniform until any kind of football, until the start of the season. So you look at where he's going in the Fantasy Pros Championship right now, Anthony, and you looked at, or you see that Derrick Henry is currently going, I beg your pardon, I had it right up in front of me, and now I don't. Derrick Henry, running back 7 at the 209. So he's going ahead of Kyren Williams, Travis Etienne, behind that glut of Barkley, Gibbs, and Taylor. How do you handle a guy like this? We know what he's capable of in the NFL, but new team, new offense, new everything for him this year, and he's not exactly the youngest guy in the world. How do you handle Derrick Henry right now at the 209?
I'm not too worried about Derrick Henry not playing in the preseason despite the new offense and change of uniform. We know what we're going to get out of Derrick Henry. Now, he's aging, but he was also aging last year, and he had a down season for what we expect out of Derrick Henry. But if we look at the whole picture last year in Tennessee, it was not the normal Titans offensive line during the Vrabel years. The quarterback position was a mess. There were no real, pass catching weapons. So the enemy defense knew that offense was going to run through Henry, and he was still fairly productive, all things considered. What I love about Henry this year, going to Baltimore, really for the first time, he gets the threat of the RPO. And I think playing in the backfield with Lamar Jackson, the Ravens did lose a couple offensive line starters, but again, the upgrade at running back from Henry should balance it all out. And we have to really consider here guys like Gus Edwards last year, or leading up to last year. He was over 5 yards a carry for his career in this backfield. So you have to assume Derrick Henry, if there's one more special season, I think it happens this year.
And that is, is he a target? Is he a fade for you? Is he a guy that you're just going to pepper in at the 209?
No, he's absolutely a target for me.
Okay.
Depending on my build. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what we have on Derrick Henry tonight, ladies and gentlemen. I want to move on and talk. I didn't think that Rico Dowdle would be factoring into the fantasy conversation. I knew he would, Anthony, but I didn't know it would be this heavy. Apparently right now, according to, was it John Machota from The Athletic? Yeah. Not only is Rico Dowdle on track to make the team in Dallas, but he might be the favorite to lead the Cowboys in rushing this year as well, which is fantastic for fantasy value for him. You look at Rico Dowdle right now over the last 3 days in the Fantasy Pros Championship, 1108, running back 44. I guess the question we need to answer here is, how much credence are you giving this report from a guy, a beat writer who does cover the team for a living? This kind of caught me by surprise.
Yeah, Machota's been there forever, so he's one of those beat writers in Dallas I will take serious. And Rico had some nice runs last year when he did get opportunities, 4.8 yards per touch, a little over 4 yards per carry, so not great as a rusher, but really nice receiving back. Now, Zeke is going to be the quote-unquote starter. He brings name value. He's going to come out of the locker room and onto the field, and the crowd's going to go nuts. Like, he's really the heartbeat of that offense and of that team. he's going to be the short yardage guy. Like from fantasy, for a fantasy football perspective, I love Zeke because I think there's a realistic chance he's going to return some touchdown upside. But when it comes to the lead running back, the lead receiver, there is a legitimate path for Rico Dowdle, and he's free right now. Like I think Rico's getting overlooked.
And he is going, I would say, like about a round behind Elliott. So if it comes down to that, Anthony, and you're let's say you're set on taking a running back in the 10th round, or even the early 11th, Elliott and Dowdle are staring you in the face. Are you going to draft Dowdle more than Elliott?
I don't know if it's going to be a more than Elliott. I think it's going to be dependent, because everything's dependent for me on my team build. I play in volume leagues. I think if I need more ceiling, I think Rico can bring more of those pop ceiling games. Okay. But Zeke, I think he brings a higher floor. Like, this is a guy, when he was conceding touches, people thought he was washed with Tony Pollard. His last 2 years in Dallas totaled 12 touchdowns in each season, and that was a missing piece last year. Remember Tony Pollard, big time bust. He was a number 2 back in red zone touches. He had 72. They couldn't punch it in. They were missing Zeke. So if Zeke gets those red zone opportunities, there's a chance he sees double-digit touchdowns. I don't think that's hot of a take.
I don't think it is either. And I think you're right. I think Dowdle probably does have the higher, spike week ceilings that you're looking for in a best ball format too. And it's tough to know when those are going to be, which is why I think I'm still team Elliott for managed leagues. But at the same time, if this Dallas offense is as good as we think it's going to be, maybe both of these guys are going to be fantasy worthy this year. Definitely, you got to roster both of them for sure. We are contractually obligated to mention Brandon Aiyuk on this show as the long national nightmare continues to go on. Will he or won't he? The latest we have from Diana Rossini about an hour ago is that the Niners have not been satisfied with what the Steelers are offering them in exchange for Brandon Aiyuk. According to Rossini's report, the Niners would like to get a receiver in return for Brandon Aiyuk, but they are open to players at other positions. It sounds like the Steelers, if Aiyuk is going to be traded, the Steelers are the most likely team that he is going to be traded to. However, it's still a non-zero chance of this not happening. And I don't know what's going to happen if we get to week 1 and Aiyuk is still on the Niners. How does he factor into the team? Does he sit out half the year, and then just come in just so he can get his accrued year? I don't know. What I do know is, as fantasy players, Anthony, we have to figure out how we're treating not only the Steelers wide receivers, but obviously the Niners receivers. Let's start with Aiyuk here. How do you handle a guy like him who really, there hasn't been much of a discount? He's slipped a little bit now, 407 in the Fantasy Pros Championship, wide receiver 23 right now. How do you feel about Aiyuk at that price, knowing that he could be in San Francisco, Pittsburgh, or potentially somewhere else in 2024?
I'm a little bit worried about Brandon Aiyuk right now. If he goes to Pittsburgh, and I'm going to assume, I know that Rossini report, I think there was a part of it where San Francisco wants a wide receiver back. I don't see why Pittsburgh trades for Aiyuk and have to pay him and want to trade George Pickens. I think they want both. So in a case where Pickens and Aiyuk are in the same wide receiver room in this Arthur Smith offense, I think it is terrible. I've been all in on George Pickens this year. That's terrible for Pickens fantasy stock. And I think it's a big hit for Brandon Aiyuk as well. Even if he went, let's say, a Devontae Adams for Aiyuk swap, I hate that as well. With Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell. I know the big stat with why I'm out on Adams right now with Vegas. In all of the games that he played with Aiden O'Connell, he averaged under 10 PPR points a game. These situations, these teams willing to take on and pay Aiyuk, these are not good situations in year 1 for Brandon Aiyuk.
With regards to Aiyuk, I still, and I've said this from the get-go, I still feel like people are drafting him not at his ceiling, but drafting him at a spot that does not accurately reflect the controversy is too strong a word, does not accurately reflect the muck and the mire that's surrounding him right now. In other words, I've been staying away, and I have been staying away the majority of drafting season, because I just feel like most drafters feel like this is going to resolve itself some way or the other. And the deeper we get into it and it's not resolved, not only are we looking at a messy situation in San Francisco, but let's just say he doesn't get moved for another week or two. He's going to come into Pittsburgh, learn a new offense, new quarterback, new OC, new head coach, new everything in the span of like a week and a half, 2 weeks, whatever it is. Like, that's dicey as well. And I always like my players to get off to fast starts. For a while, I was not, most of the offseason, I was not targeting or fading Aiyuk. And then as I realized there wasn't much of a discount on him, I started to fade him at his current spot. And Anthony, I'm still fading him. I'm seeing more bad than good here.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't have a ton of Aiyuk, not now, not earlier in the offseason. Part of me, right, like, is San Francisco the best possible situation for Brandon Aiyuk? Because, like, he's been really good. He's also in an offense with CMC, Debo, Kittle. Do we know if Brandon Aiyuk is the alpha somewhere else and he's getting the one-on-one coverage from the top corner, the double coverage, and it's a quarterback downgrade and an offensive system downgrade? This might be a disaster.
It very well could be. It might be one of those things we look back on like, oh my God, I'm glad I avoided that landmine in fantasy. Or like if it comes to be like it's early September or late August and this guy is still unsettled, but he's now going at the end of the 6th and the 7th round, people might be like, oh, this is the time to pounce, and it still might not be a value. Like it still could be a train wreck.
It's almost like how like T. Higgins to me, where like the consensus, oh, he's a 1A. No, he's not.
Right. That's true.
And I don't know what Brandon Aiyuk is, but, I think the discrepancy or the difference is he's seeing all these, he wants that Justin Jefferson money, and I think the 49ers think he's closer to that Devonta Smith money.
I think that's right, too. I think that they understand what they have in Aiyuk, and I think that's part, like, I know it's difficult to pay everybody, and they're going to have to pay Brock Purdy at some point, and they're already paying a lot of people right now. But I think if Aiyuk was an alpha and a true wide receiver one, the Niners would find a way to pay him and keep him and Deebo Samuel around as wide receiver ones. The fact is they have not done it. And they drafted a receiver in the first round and Ricky Pearsall too, which I think is interesting. And they send Robbie Chosen today. Now that doesn't, I don't know how much that factors into it as well. But let's talk about the other Niners receivers here, Anthony. Deebo Samuel, 307, wide receiver 14. Ricky Pearsall, wide receiver 68, 1501. Either one of those spots where those guys are going, does that sound like a pretty good price to you right now, given what's going on with Aiyuk?
I think right now, Debo's the guy I want, because if Aiyuk gets moved, we're going to see Deebo Samuel. I think his ADP moves up almost a full round. So right now, I think we're getting him at a little bit of a discount.
What about, Pearsall on the 15th is interesting, but if this Rossini report is to be believed, and I don't see why it wouldn't be, then if they acquire a receiver, does that hurt Pearsall's redraft value? I know 15th round is pretty low, obviously, but we can't just assume that he's going to be the second receiver in San Francisco if Aiyuk gets traded. So at that spot, does that seem about right for you? Is it too expensive right now for Pearsall?
I don't think it's too expensive. I think it's about right because it's a dart throw spot anyway, and he does have that first round draft pedigree. But we really don't know, like, what receiver are they getting back? I think that plays a role.
Yeah.
If it's Roman Wilson, does that move the needle?
Well, and the other thing with Wilson, number one, didn't he get hurt?
Yep.
Okay, and number
I'm just
two,
throwing a name out there.
But he's a rookie like Pearsall too. So at that point, I would say, okay, maybe this is still Pearsall because he's been with the organization longer, and he's swimming in the same water as Wilson, except for he's been in it longer, so the water is actually a little bit more pleasing to his body rather than Wilson is being thrown into the deep end. If that were to happen, I don't know what other receiver. I don't think Pittsburgh would send Calvin Austin in this deal, but who knows?
Yeah.
It's just going to be a bizarre thing. Now, speaking of the Steelers receivers, let's assume for the sake of this conversation that Aiyuk gets moved to Pittsburgh. George Pickens is obviously going to slip in drafts. Right now, he is going as Pickens is at the 507 as wide receiver 27. Roman Wilson, he's basically free 20th round right now. He's not even being drafted in every draft. But the Pickens thing is interesting. How far do you think he'll drop if Aiyuk does get to Pittsburgh? And then if that's the case, at what point would you be buying on Pickens because it's too far?
Well, like I said earlier, I'm already buying on Pickens in the current situation.
Right.
Aiyuk goes there. Like, it's the recency bias. It's where he's coming from. It's because Ayuk's been more productive. I think he's going to be overvalued, and we're going to see George Pickens fall. Like, I could see, is there a world where George Pickens falls to where he was going last year when they had Deontay Johnson?
Yes, there's that world. Absolutely.
And at that point, I buy in. Who do we really know that George Pickens isn't just as good, if not better, wide receiver than Brandon Aiyuk?
Right. Yeah, we don't know.
George Pickens has flash talent, raw talent. I think he fell a little bit in the draft because of some off the field, or maybe had some fights in college. But this guy, I believe, led the NFL in yards after the catch last year. He's an explosive receiver. He put up some big games with atrocious quarterback play. Like, again, Brandon Aiyuk has it because he's been in the ideal situation his whole career. George Pickens has looked special with garbage.
Right, yes.
I mean, I'm trying to be nice here.
No, but you speak the truth. I mean, you are the real NFL guru. We are going to listen, and we want the truth on this program for sure. I think that while that is, I'll tell you this. So the Niners and the Steelers wide receiver situations are muddy for different reasons. Another receiver situation in the NFL that's also muddy for a completely unrelated reason, because there are no trades. Green Bay. Jaden Reed returned to practice today. Sounds like the calf injury was not a big deal. Christian Watson, Anthony, I don't know if you know this. I live in Northeast Wisconsin, and every time Watson gets hit or grabs for something, everybody holds their breath. It's insane. With everything, with how closely we've been watching Watson this year. Everybody and their mother who have seen practices, be it fans, be it beat writers, is talking up Romeo Doubs. And I know the high stakes players in the FFPC has spent the majority of the offseason talking up Dontavian Wicks. Jordan Love says Wicks is going to have a monster year this year. But you look at this Green Bay situation, I'm fine attacking it in a best ball league, but in a managed league where you got to figure out which guy to start this week, this is going to be maddening for fantasy players this year, I think.
Yeah, I certainly don't love it. You bring up Christian Watson. I've been buying in on Christian Watson this offseason. I know there was the reports that he saw a specialist.
Yep.
I believe at a university had, some kind of special testing and studies done on the hamstring. And there was like a discrepancy with the size of his legs that could have played a role to his. It was
the strength. He was, yes. I can't remember which one was which, but he had 20% more strength in one hamstring than the other. But keep going.
I like that he's being proactive and trying to figure this out. And if there's any receiver in this wide receiver room that can be an alpha, Christian Watson is that guy. He's put up some big spike weeks, and that's really good for best ball. And I think that's where I'm comfortable drafting him. But could I see myself in a Fantasy Pros championship? What if Christian Watson, plays 14, 15 games? Are we getting a top 15 wide receiver in the FFPC scoring format at his current ADP? I don't know if I can pass that up.
Yeah. Well, and
points matter. Points
do matter
when it matters, in the shootout.
And the thing is, like, Watson not only has that, when he's healthy, he not only has that higher floor, he's got a really high ceiling with his big play potential and his game breaking potential. We've seen some of that already in the preseason, in practices. They obviously had the family night scrimmage that was going on this past Saturday as well. There were some plays where Jair Alexander, one of the best corners in the league, was on him, and he was still making plays.
Yeah.
So it certainly gets you excited for Watson. I would agree. I think that something to keep in mind with the Packers, I know that the hype balloon and the helium is rising for Dontavian Wicks. Bear in mind, he's still listed as the number 4 receiver on the depth chart in Green Bay. I know everybody's excited for Jaden Reed to build on that rookie year. Jaden Reed's big rookie year was due in part to Wicks missing some time and Watson missing a lot of time as well. And Doubs is another guy that everybody's talking up in the preseason, but we've talked up Doubs the last 2 preseasons as well. Is having an amazing camp and making all these plays. And then when it comes to the regular season, he's all right, but he's not a world beater. And I think that's, one of these things is not like the other. Watson, I'm with you, is the guy that stands out more so than the other Packers receivers there for sure.
Yeah.
Keeping it on the receiver tip, Anthony. Rashid Shaheed did not practice yesterday, according to Mike Triplett. I don't know if he's practiced today, but that was 4 days in a row that he had missed due to hamstring tightness, which is not good. It's a soft tissue thing. It's a hamstring, and it's for a guy who utilizes his speed to get yardage, fantasy points, and touchdowns on the season. Now, this could just be the Saints being cautious, or it could be something else. Why do I bring it up? Well, Michael Thomas is not in New Orleans anymore, right? And who else do they have there? A.T. Perry, okay. I mean, I guess he's somebody. I haven't heard about anybody raving about his training camp or anything like that so far. Shaheed is in the 12th round. This is a guy that can help you, especially with the dual flex in the FFPC. This is a guy that you could flex out if you go with a heavy running back or a heavy tight end start or something like that. How concerning is a hamstring injury to a receiver, again, early August, but still, I'm having minor palpitations for my Shaheed shares at this point, Anthony. Am I right to be this concerned, or do I just need to cool off?
I would be a little bit concerned, especially if you have a lot of Rashad Shaheed. I do. I've been buying in this offseason. No Michael Thomas. I believe they brought a new OC, Carmichael. Mm-hmm. We could see a little bit an uptick in passing volume. And Rashid, he's looked good, like small sample size, but he's had, 15.6 yards per catch. Last year, 17.4. 2 years ago, he's flashed. He's had those big spike weeks. Like, could this be the season where it all comes together? I don't mind taking my shots on him. But, yeah, it is concerning that, he's a little bit banged up with this lower body injury. Like, these are usually wide receiver killers.
And that's the thing. I know he's a 12th round pick, and we'll see if he slips further than that. But this is concerning for, if it's a guy like, I guess it doesn't really matter. I mean, even if it's like a, quote unquote possession guy, like a slot receiver, like, Rashee Rice or something like that, it's still concerning. But with a speedster, it's even more so. Yeah. Bill Hollywood agreeing with us in the YouTube chat right now. This is pretty concerning. Mike Williams, let's move on. This has really been a receiver segment. Holy cow. Mike Williams was limited to an individual work Tuesday's practice. He is not going to participate in team drills for another week or two. This, according to Rich Simony, who covers the New York Jets for ESPN. So if we look at the New York Jets and how they're being drafted as far as the receivers go in the FFPC this year, we see that Garrett Wilson, obviously 110, no problem there, no squabble there. Mike Williams, wide receiver 60 at the 1303. Malachi Corley is at the 1807 as wide receiver 80. Specifically about Mike Williams here, I know it's fun to think about him catching passes from Aaron Rodgers. He's going to have Garrett Wilson taking pressure off of him. Tyler Conklin, Malachi Corley will take care of coverage over the middle. And Mike Williams should be free to roam, seeing a lot of single coverage this year. But at the same time, this is a dude who has had a lot of injury issues over the years, a guy who is no stranger to the trainer's table. 1303 right now. I don't know if you have a lot of shares of Mike Williams this year. How do we need to treat this? Do we fade him based on that? That he's not going to be participating in team activities for another week or two? Or is this a buying opportunity to get him on the cheap, Anthony?
I think this is a big buying opportunity. Mike Williams, like if we go back, we know he's a little bit older. He's entering his age 30 season. He's 29.8 right now. Former first round pick. If you remember the first 4 years of his career, really got off to a slow start, but since 2021, he's averaged at least 13.6 PPR points a game. And last year, in the 3 games played, 16.7 points per game, which would have been a career best. I think he has some gas left in the tank, and being the over-the-top threat in this offense, like I'm very bullish on the Jets offense. If it clicks the way I think it can, like Mike Williams is a big-time value.
Yeah, and if he does settle in as the number 2 target on the team, which, I mean, maybe it'll be him, maybe it'll be Breece Hall, but he's definitely the number 2 receiver when he's healthy, at least to start the season. We'll see how Corley goes after that. But Williams is a guy, if you can, and if the, here's the thing, like the Jets get a bad rap every year, but you think about what happened to Aaron Rodgers last year. I mean, what's to say he wouldn't have thrown for 3,500 yards and 25 touchdowns? And if that's the case, are we really going to penalize the number 2 receiver in that offense that much this year? I don't see that happening. So I'm with you. I think 13th round, who cares? He's not going to lose your league for you. I'm with you. Mike Williams might be a good buying opportunity. And, oh, by the way, in like a week or so, he might even be a better buying opportunity, depending upon what we see in the high stakes drafts over at the FFPC. Cardinals head coach Jonathan Gannon was talking to reporters recently, and he was, I think that everybody and their mother's excited for Marvin Harrison Jr. this year. Everybody's talking about Trey McBride, especially at the tight end premium format with the FFPC. A lot of people love him. I even had people telling me about Michael Wilson this year. But according to the Arizona Cardinals, Jonathan Gannon says Dortch is going to have a big year. He's, quote, has the look in his eye. He's a gamer ready to buckle up and play football. Now, over the last 2 years, 76 catches, 750 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Slot usage went from 83% 2 years ago to 29% last year. If he is going to be in the slot more this year because Martin Harrison Jr. is going to be on the outside, maybe we can get a return to that. Dortch is free right now. He is not costing you anything in drafts. As a late round flyer, how many shares do you think you're going to have of Greg Dortch this year, Anthony?
Maybe a handful. I've been buying into Zay Jones, who's also there, and I think they could be in a little bit of a battle, position battle. I like Zay Jones more. I've also seen a lot more of Zay Jones, especially like recently in Jacksonville. He's put up some big games, and I think when it's all said and done, like this could just be Greg Dortch type. This could be coach speak. I'd rather take my shots, and it's just maybe a personal bias. I like Zay Jones more, and they're going around the same price, I believe.
Yeah, Zay Jones. Let me just look it up right now. As long as you bring him up, 19th round right now, as wide receiver 90. Dortch has not even been drafted, so Zay Jones technically a little bit ahead of Greg Dortch right now. We'll see what happens over the course of the next week or so after this news settles in. But to your point, I do think that these two, if you're drafting one or the other, you're kind of waiting to see what happens, because if it doesn't happen in the first couple of weeks, you can either drop one for the other or drop them both for something different. Question in the YouTube chat right now from, where did I see it? Fat Randy. I have the 3rd pick in a draft tomorrow. Should CeeDee's contract scare me from taking him? This is a good question because we're coming up mid-August right now, almost mid-August. We're still early August. And if CeeDee Lamb is the best player available at 103, Anthony, how do you feel about drafting him at the moment?
I haven't seen CeeDee Lamb fall, but we are getting to this point in the offseason. The offseason is almost over, preseason starting. We're 8 days into August, and we have not seen very much movement at all on contract talks. I think there is going to be a point where I'm worried about CeeDee Lamb not showing up or possibly holding out. Like, he really has all of the leverage if you look at the rest of his Dallas team right now. And maybe he plays that card. If you have the 3rd, now is your draft going on right now? Is this a draft? Is it going on right now?
Fat Randy said it's a draft tomorrow night, so I assume it has not started yet. So let's assume it's like McCaffrey and Tyreek Hill are off the board, or like McCaffrey and Hall, or what. Let's just say that he's got CeeDee Lamb rated as his 3rd best player, but the only thing that would keep him from drafting is his nervousness about this contract.
I think there's a part of me that goes Jamar Chase. And Chase has a contract issue himself, but I think there's a world where Jamar Chase plays before CeeDee Lamb. Yeah. And to me, like, I'm a conspiracy theorist. I think other things matter. And when it's all said and done, I think Joe Burrow can coerce Jamar Chase on the field before Dak can coerce CeeDee Lamb back.
It's one of those things, like from Prescott, I just tell like Lamb, like, listen, man, we're going to get paid. Maybe it's by Cowboys. Maybe it's not. Let's just go scorched earth on the whole league this year, you and me together, and we're going to get paid big time. That could be one of those things too. I don't know. You could be right about that. The other chat that was popping up here, I think it was from Sean Green. Yeah, he said, Tyrone Tracy looking good against the Lions tonight. Tracy, 5 carries, 26 yards. I don't see him having a target yet, but he did bust off a 12-yard run. Permar99 saying he got him as his running back 5 when he drafted on Tuesday this year. How do you feel about Tyrone Tracy as a late round dart throw, my friend?
I love Tyrone Tracy. I'm getting a lot of him. Am I really that worried about Devin Singletary? I know he knows the offense and all that good stuff, but it's still Devin Singletary. Tyrone Tracy, what I like about him, I believe he's a converted wide receiver. And he could be that pass catching back in this Giants offense. And I don't think Devin Singletary is that good of a pass catcher. Maybe Devin Singletary takes on the early down role. We see Tyrone Tracy come in, like Saquon Barkley. There's a lot of vacated running back targets. They're going to go somewhere. Like, they're all like Malik Nabers is getting 250 targets. So Tyrone Tracy, who knows if he looks good and he's explosive, he's the younger guy. Like, who's to say he's not the starter by week 10? Like, I'm not worried about Eric Gray.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, no, and I think my whole concern, well, not concern with Tracy, because I think he's a fine pick where he's going. But if the opportunity ever presented itself, could he be the guy to touch the ball 15 to 20 times a game? That's what I don't know, because he's a converted receiver.
Yeah.
And maybe that could happen down the road. Year one, I don't know if it happens. Best ball, perfect pick, because you'll get his spike weeks no matter what. Let's go rapid fire. We got a bunch of questions here tonight. On Merce watching us on X right now. He's in a 16-round keeper league. He's got to keep either Puka Nacua, Kyron Williams, or Sam Laporta. I would rank them as far as keepers go. I would rank them Nacua, Laporta, Kyron Williams. How do you feel about it, Anthony?
I go Puka, Kyron, Laporta. Now, is this tight end premium? Are we going FFPC
we don't know.
rules?
If it's tight end premium, I would say Laporta over Nacua. If it's not, I like Nacua better. Williams, I'll tell you what. Let's save our. Do we have Kyron Williams? No, we don't have Kyron Williams on the rundown. So let's talk about him right now. I'm nervous about him this year because of them, the Rams adding Blake Corum, because he was dealing with a foot injury this offseason. I know they love him. I know they want to use him like they did last year. My concern is it just won't happen because Kyron Williams is not a pedigreed guy, and he's a guy that dealt with some injuries last year as well.
Yeah, the thing with Kyron is a little bit banged up. He was explosive. He exploded. Like, he was a league winner last year. Mm-hmm. But all the reports, and we've already seen him a little bit banged up this offseason, the reports are suggesting, especially the latest one, that the Rams want to prioritize keeping Kyron fresh.
Yeah.
That tells me, hey, maybe they sprinkle in a little bit more Blake Corum than we think they're going to sprinkle in. Because I was at first, hey, this is Kyron's backfield. The more I watch tape of Blake Corum, the more I think he's a legitimate back and maybe a little bit more than a true handcuff to Kyron Williams.
Right. And that, I mean, it's one of those things too, where if he gets the opportunity, I think he's going to be great. But if the whole idea was to let Corum get his feet wet this year, work him in kind of, but you still want to ride Kyron Williams, well, then Williams is the pick, obviously, at ADP right now. Let's see, what else do we got here? Oaks on YouTube. Hey, I have the 111 pick in a 14-man league. Who do you think I should draft between Gibbs, Wilson, Jonathan Taylor, or Saquon Barkley? So let's rank them. Not all these guys may be available for you, Oaks, at the 111. I would say, assuming this is full PPR, let's go Gibbs, Wilson. Maybe I'd put them in that order, actually. Gibbs, Wilson, Taylor, Barkley. I think that's how I'd have it. What about you, Anthony?
I go Garrett Wilson, Barkley, JT Gibbs. I'm probably lower than consensus on Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah.
You have factors like David Montgomery still there. Jamison Williams. Is this the year he finally gets going? I like Gibbs, but like Barkley doesn't have a David Montgomery behind him.
Yep.
JT doesn't catch passes at the rate that Saquon Barkley does. And I said earlier, I'm all in on New York Jets. Like, Garrett Wilson is talented enough to be the Devontae Adams for Aaron Rodgers. So that's why I think he has the highest ceiling out of all of them, followed by Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. And maybe I'm underrating Garrett Wilson, because if he's healthy, that tandem of, think about how much Aaron Rodgers loves to throw to one guy, and he'll throw it around the field too. But Wilson is the supremely talented perimeter player on that offense, so he should get a lot of targets.
And I remember Garrett Wilson making plays last year with it seemed like three guys were draped all over him, but he was still coming down with the ball.
Yep. Yeah, he's a super talented guy. Yeah. Super, unless you're Charvarius Ward from the Niners, who says he's never even heard of him, which that's certainly a take. Okay, let's move on here and find out where you stand on certain players, Anthony. I want to get this segment in because I know you have some strong takes on these players, and I'm going to lead things off with James Conner. Phoenix Cardinals Johnny Venerable said James Conner is going to see the bulk share of the team's backfield workload in 2024. According to Venerable, the coaches love his tough running style, his veteran leadership, and when the Cardinals were at their best on offense last year, Conner was the running back there. This is according to an interview with Patrick Daugherty and Denny Carter on RotoWorld. Michael Carter could mix in behind James Conner, according to Venerable, rather than Trey Benson, which is not what a lot of people want to hear. Yeah. Obviously, those dynasty players that invested mid to late first round picks on Trey Benson. Bear in mind, this dude never had 20 rushing attempts in a single game in his college career, talking about Benson here. And if Connor were to go down, okay, Benson's part of the story here. But right now, everybody's healthy. And right now in that Arizona backfield, as we just heard, it's Connor's backfield, and he's going at running back 19 at the 606. Anthony Cervino, where do you stand on James Conner?
He is one of my most roster running backs this offseason. Trey Benson, you brought up Dynasty. He's the guy in 2025. Why do I say that? Well, James Conner on the final year of his contract, he's getting a little bit older. And I view Conner similar to how I view Aaron Jones. When teams are not tied to you long-term, they're going to squeeze all the juice out of you. And I think that's what we see out of the Cardinals and James Conner this year. 1,000 yards rushing last year, first time in his career, 5 yards per carry, career best. Past 3 seasons, at least 8 total touchdowns. He had 9 last year and 18 in 2021 with this Cardinals team. I just think that this is his backfield now. There is a red flag. James Conner, we know, misses time. Pretty much every year of his career, he has missed time. But is that going to scare me off of drafting him at cost? No, because, last year, 13 games gave us the 13th most PPR points a game. 2022, 13 games gave us the 9th most PPR points per game. 2021, 15 games, the 7th most PPR points a game. So he's been very, very solid. And I feel like he's going undervalued once again.
I think the other thing to keep in mind here in regards to Conner, because I think you're right. The first thing people always say, well, wow, is he going to stay healthy? Is there a running back that you draft in the mid-6th round that you just assume is going to be healthy all year? I mean, a lot of these guys do not stay healthy. Look at the guys going around him. Ramondre Stevenson, Aaron Jones, guys that both dealt with injury last year. If you're taking a running back anywhere there, are you expecting Stevenson, Conner, and or Jones to stay healthy for 17 games? I don't. I just know it's not going to happen, and that's fine. It's still good value for James Conner in the mid-6th round. Now, speaking of injured running backs, let's talk about Nick Chubb. Zach Jackson, who covers the Browns for The Athletic, says that they don't need to rush Nick Chubb back. He was listed on the active PUP list at the start of training camp, along with Naheem Hines. Remember back to 2023, week 2, awful knee injury for Nick Chubb. 2 off-season surgeries, still no timetable for his return, and there's a non-zero chance he ends up, maybe better than a non-zero chance, that he ends up on the PUP list that would knock him out for the first 4 games of the season. Nick Chubb is going as late as he's ever gone for his entire NFL career in the FFPC. Running back 35, Anthony, at the 909. This is Tyjae Spears, Austin Eckler, and Jerome Ford territory. Where do you stand on Nick Chubb at that ADP?
I'm all over the place on Nick Chubb because I'm waiting for some kind of a positive report that is not him lifting weights. Because, as a weightlifter myself who had a neck surgery, I can lift weights very heavy, but I can't go out and swing a golf club without putting myself in bed. I just can't with plates in my neck. But so him squatting doesn't really matter to me. I need to see him on a football field making football moves. But at the value for Nick Chubb, if he gives us a half a season, can he return on his current ADP? I think the answer is yes. Now, team build's going to matter. You can't be drafting Nick Chubb I don't think you can do that if you go 0 running back and, he's your RB3. You might need to put him in your flex or in your RB2 spot right away.
Mm-hmm.
But, if you're comfortable at your running back position, you're like, hey, Nick Chubb's sitting here and I have a nice looking team that could make a playoff run, then I think he's a player you want to prioritize.
I think that the concern I would have is not necessarily that. Well, I mean, obviously the obvious concern is the injury and how does he rebound. That's baked into his ADP. My concern is, am I going to be able to stick it out, especially when the bye weeks kick in, with Nick Chubb taking up a roster spot when I only have 20 of them to play with? Is that going to be feasible for me? And if it's not, then I'm going to find another use for my 9th round pick rather than utilizing Nick Chubb. That would be my biggest thing because of the unknown. We just don't know exactly when he is going to come back. And with a player like that, that's already being talked about being put on the PUP list, it's I don't want to say it's easy for me to just find somebody else at that point, but it's not hard for me to move on from Nick Chubb at that spot.
We see this a lot. The veteran player like Nick Chubb sitting there or, TJ Hawkinson, it's like And I do this myself. I want to be smarter than the rest of the room.
Mm-hmm.
And be like, hey, I'm going to go grab this big value, and it doesn't always work out. So it's a big risk.
That's the thing. It's like what looks like a value in mid-August, early August, might be like in October. Like, God, why did I ever do this? And that's why we play. It's maddening and it's fun. Ray Davis. Let's talk about him a little bit. This is a guy that was drafted this year by the Buffalo Bills to, as of right now, play behind James Cook. But I know there's a lot of people out there saying that he's going to factor in at the goal line, that he's going to factor in to just the normal ones, the starters on that team. Like, it's not going to be James Cook backfield all season. It's just not going to happen. And Ray Davis is going to be bigger than what a lot of people are giving him credit for as far as his role in the offense. Where do you stand on Ray Davis, Anthony?
I am buying into Ray Davis, and I feel like the Bills for a few years now, they're telling everybody we want another running back to complement James Cook. They started with Damian Harris. They've kicked the tires on Latavius Murray and used him for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
They even brought in Leonard Fournette at the end of last year. That tells me they want another guy. I don't think they've been able to get that guy yet. And if Ray Davis is that guy, yeah, sure. Why can't we see him get into the mix, not only on the early downs, but also on the goal line? Josh Allen is 28 years old. Do they want Josh Allen to continue taking the beating that he takes and putting his body at risk? Do they, you bring up guys like Cam Newton, Dante Culver, these bigger quarterbacks who were majestic early in their career, and they end up falling off a cliff because of the beating they take and the way they play football. There's a part of me that thinks they want the guy who can take some of that pressure off of Josh Allen.
And the other thing to keep in mind, too, with Davis is if his major value is goal line, taking that away from Josh Allen, that's more of a pessimistic. The reason to have a pessimistic view on Josh Allen rather than have a positive view about Ray Davis, because he's going to have to do more than touchdowns. 12-12 is where he's going right now. Running back 51. If Cook were to miss time, or if Davis shows himself competent on pass protection as well as catching the ball in the backfield, then we could be looking at a pretty even split there, which is why I have concerns about drafting James Cook where he's going this year as well. Kendre Miller, you talk about being all over the place with Nick Chubb. I'm all over the place with Kendre Miller this year. Yeah. What a roller coaster it's been. I was of the opinion that this was Kamara. This was his final competent year of fantasy. And that Kendre Miller at some point this year would show himself the more worthy back. He would show himself as the guy that you want to trust in the New Orleans backfield from a team management league, managed league standpoint. And that Kendre Miller was the guy that you wanted to get, not only because of that, but because he was so cheap in drafts. Then we get this bomb from Nick Underhill reporting this a couple of weeks ago that Dennis Allen said Kendre Miller needs to figure out how to stay healthy because he's already dealing with a hamstring injury this year. He missed the start of last season, which was his rookie year, with a hamstring injury, and then he hurt his ankle later on in the season. Jamal Williams then took over as the backup to Alvin Kamara. It was a bad year for Jamal Williams, but at least he was available. The best ability is availability in the NFL. So now I'm kind of like, man, is Kendre Miller still a buy? Is Kendre Miller, and where you look at where he's going right now, running back 57, 14th round. So he's not free. Is the juice worth the squeeze in the 14th round for Kendre Miller? Anthony Cervino, where do you stand on him?
From what we've seen last year, Jamal Williams, he doesn't have much left. Alvin Kamara, he's been on a decline as a rusher for the past 2 or 3 seasons. Mm-hmm. What really helped Alvin Kamara was all the pass catching opportunities. I think there is a need for a guy like Kendre Miller to step up. But yeah, the Dennis Allen words, they're scaring me off a little bit because we know how much that could be. He could bury Kendre Miller, right or wrong, and just utilize the 2 veterans that they have. So, I have a lot of Kendre Miller from earlier drafts, but right now I think I'm kind of pumping the brakes a little bit, seeing what else is out there. And I don't like that because I think he can be a good back and he can be productive and he could certainly carve out a role. But if the coach isn't buying into you, that's an issue.
It's a huge issue. And the fact that there's still an incumbent running back that I think the Saints are still expecting good production out of this year, then that's another ding on your fantasy value too. Jamal Williams is still there as well. Again, another trusted veteran that they know that they're not going to get a ton out of him, but he is the veteran, and NFL coaches seem to trust veterans more than the younger, unproven players, something we've always been fighting with in fantasy for many, many years, and it doesn't seem like it's going to change anytime soon. Xavier Worthy, let's shift to receivers here. Anthony, as we look at the rookie speedster from Texas joining the Kansas City Chiefs this year, more and more time goes by. It certainly seems that Rashee Rice is not going to get suspended this year. Xavier Worthy, wide receiver 42 at the 807 right now. He's still got to contend with Hollywood Brown for targets, and then some guy named Travis Kelce, who seems to be picking up a lot of targets over the last several years in Kansas City as well. Where do you stand on Xavier Worthy as an 8th round pick in a 12-team PPR league?
I think that's a little bit too expensive in a redraft league and even in best ball. I am very much in on Kansas City. I'm in on this offense, this passing attack bouncing back. But, I don't know if Rice is getting suspended this year. And the closer we get, the closer we read into things, it looks like Rice will not get suspended. Mm-hmm. And I don't have any inside source, or this is just reading between the lines until next year. So we have to deal with Rice. We have to deal with Kelce, who is now healthy. Remember, Kelce went into last season with a lower body injury. Hollywood Brown, a veteran receiver who is now linked up with the best pass. I mean, he's played with Kyler and Lamar, really good quarterbacks. Mahomes is the best passer of the football in the NFL and that Hollywood's ever been with. So this is a very crowded offense, and Worthy's going to have a role. But I think Worthy's role in year one is he'll be there if one of these receivers gets hurt, but he's going to have more. He's going to make more of an NFL impact than a fantasy impact.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. I mean, this is a totally different conversation we're having if Travis Kelce, fell off the proverbial cliff late last season. This is a different conversation if Rashee Rice is going to be suspended this year. This is a different conversation if Marquise Brown signs elsewhere other than Kansas City. So with all those guys there and Patrick Mahomes, a talented quarterback who knows how to find the open guy and doesn't necessarily feel any kind of pressure to pump the ball into the same guy over and over again. Worthy, decent best ball play, 8th round in a managed redraft league. I'm with you, Anthony. I think I'm going to find somebody else there rather than Worthy.
Do you feel that he's even expensive in best ball in the 8th round or wherever he's going in best ball?
No, let's look at that right now. So I'll bring up the FFPC best ball tournament. This is ADP over the last 2 days. Wide receiver 40 at the 7-11. So about a half round difference. So he goes up about a half round there. Maybe I can get on board a little bit more with that, but then consider the other players that are going around him in that. Christian Watson, Jaylen Warren, who I like quite a bit as well. Jackson Smith and Jigba, Najee Harris. So it kind of depends what your team structure looks like at that point. But there are other players I like at that point too. So you can make the case that he's even going a little too high in best ball leagues as well. Let's move on and talk about, I believe, one of your favorites in Josh Downs, or at least he was one of your favorites. Maybe he's still one of your favorites this year. Ian Rappaport reported yesterday Josh Downs is going to miss a month to a month and a half. Ankle injury, which was a high ankle sprain, was the diagnosis on that. No training camp for him, no preseason for him, and then we don't know if he's going to play in week 1 against the Houston Texans. This is going to be a tough sell for Josh Downs this year because we're kind of going in blind with him this season with Anthony Richardson. We saw a little bit last year of those two guys working together, but not a ton. And now we don't know how far behind the curve he's going to be given all this time he is missing. Perfect time for A.D. Mitchell to step up, although I think those guys are more complementary players rather than duplications of skills. So it's not like you can just plug Mitchell into the Downs role there. Maybe this is good for Jelani Woods. I don't know. But where do you stand on Josh Downs? I'll give you the ADP on him right now. In the Fantasy Pros Championship, wide receiver 61 at the 1305. Again, he's gone as late as the 1511, and I would expect the 1305 ADP to come down, Anthony, as more and more people let this injury news wash over him. Where do you stand on Josh Downs right now?
I think Downs is a pretty good value. Now, my biggest issue with Josh Downs is that I don't see a high ceiling, right? Like where he's going, I think he's going to bring a high floor, which, is not bad in a managed redraft league like the Fantasy Pros Championship. So I will continue to draft him. I'm not very scared off. You bring up Mitchell, you bring up Pierce. Downs was number 3 in the NFL last season in slot snaps. I don't know if those other 2 receivers excel in the slot the way Downs does. So I anticipate him coming back once he's healthy and sliding back into his role.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't really scare me off, and I would be happy to take him at a little bit more of a discount.
I think that he's one of those guys that I'm not really in on best ball unless I have Richardson. But man, in a managed league where I need to plug somebody in that I just need 10, 12 points out of to feel okay about on a bye week or injury, I feel pretty good about that with Josh Downs, with the opportunity for even more. And so now he strikes me as a guy that, I'll be taking advantage of this and getting him in the 15th, 16th round at this point, if he's going to continue to fall that far, which I think is important. We don't know if he's going to fall that far. I just project that is my best guess. Speaking of other late round receivers, let's talk about Odell Beckham. Now, people say, Balky, why are we talking about Odell Beckham? This makes no sense. Odell Beckham right now, wide receiver 97, 2007 in the Fantasy Pros Championship, not even being drafted in every single league. But I bring this up. If Tyreek Hill is going as the 101 in some drafts, but usually never further than the 105, if Jalen Waddle is a second or a third round pick, what happens if either one of those guys go down and you have a guy in Odell Beckham who's got the chops, who still put up numbers post ACL surgery? What about Odell Beckham as a late round dart throw? Is this just a fool's errand, or is there something here? Again, you would need an injury to happen, but quite frankly, Anthony, anybody you're drafting round 17, 18, 19, 20, you need an injury for them to be viable. I think Beckham, nobody talks about this, but could Beckham be a guy that becomes an every week flex if Hill or Waddle were to miss time?
I think so, because he in his situation last year in Baltimore, like, it wasn't great. He enters this Miami Dolphins offense, warmer climate when OBJ's a little bit older. But the thing that I don't think enough people are talking about is Mike McDaniel and how he schemes his best players open. And I think that's going to be really essential for OBJ. And I treat him like a handcuff to Tyreek, like you said, or Jalen Waddle. More so Waddle gets a little bit banged up here and there, but even Tyreek down the stretch, we've seen him in and out of games. Why not plug and play a veteran like OBJ? And we're not paying anything for him, right? Right. I think there's a couple of spike weeks left in OBJ in this Miami offense. I wouldn't be saying the same if we went back to New York Giants or anything, but like in this particular situation and his ADP, why not?
Yeah, reuniting the LSU guys and Malik Nabers and Odell Beckham in New York, that would be fun to see for sure. According to the Minnesota Vikings, TJ Hockenson, and this isn't new news, this is like 2 weeks old, Hockenson was placed on the active PUP list. Now, Hockenson, in his first full season with the Vikings, 95 catches, 960 yards, 5 touchdowns. Overall tight end in fantasy points per game, and overall tight end 2, in fantasy points per game. We know he is not going to be healthy. Well, I shouldn't say that. I don't think he's going to be healthy to start the season this year. The question, and I think fantasy players are thinking the same thing, because Hockenson right now, as far as his ADP goes, it's kind of down there. Tight end 14 at the 909. How do we handle Hockenson in drafts, Anthony, knowing that this is a guy that probably will not be out there week 1. He might not even be out there week 4. He might not even be out there week 6 or week 7 or even later. It's such a nebulous situation with Hockenson, knowing that you have to soak a 9th round pick into him. Where do you stand on TJ Hockenson right now?
Even in the FFPC, which is tight end premium, I'm still scared off of TJ Hockenson. And it's more than when is he going to come back. Now, you bring up Hawkinson's numbers. The last time he played a full season, his quarterback was Kirk Cousins. This quarterback scenario in Minnesota, it doesn't sit well with me, because there's so many variables. Like, are we going to get the same old Sam Darnold? Are we going to get a Sam Darnold who has a reclamation season like we got out of Baker Mayfield? There's so many different moving parts here. I just don't know if I'm ready to take that risk that high on TJ Hockenson coming off the injury.
We've been going hard here for like an hour, and that's where Anthony Cervino stands on all those players. But let's put him on the clock. Let's find out who he would rather draft between Kincaid and McBride, between Collins and Malik Nabers, between Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. He is the real NFL guru on the X and in real life. from RotoWire.com, Anthony Cervino, my guest co-host tonight. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. Don't go anywhere. The Better Sports Network's high-stakes fantasy football show rolls on right after this.
Flair once said, if you want to be the man, you got to beat the man. And if you want to be the man or woman this fantasy football season, you got to play over at myffpc.com. That's where all the best fantasy gamers play. That's where all the high-stakes gamers play because they've got the high-stakes leagues. They have the best formats. They have the best payouts. It's the place to be. And if you win a FFPC main event or a Fantasy Pros Championship contest over there, you put some serious respect on your name and some money in your pocket. Anyone can win their hometown league, right? You're probably a great fantasy gamer. Prove it. You go out and win an event like this, you can go and put in your Twitter bio or X bio, FFPC main event champion. That means something. That's definitive proof that you're one of the best fantasy gamers in the world. So go over to myffpc.com and use promo code COOP. They'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more. And now you're on your road to greatness, right? You could even do an online draft, or you can go and draft in Las Vegas with the stars. Draft at Planet Hollywood for the FFPC main event. That's where they're all doing it. It's awesome stuff. So get set up now so that you can be a star this year. You can be the man. Just like Ric Flair, you can be a champion. Woo!
At the 111 here tonight. ADP of 112, so you guys are spot on. But Theo, it didn't sound like you loved anybody there.
No, I think it's a little bit flat, and our queue just got kind of eaten up a little bit. But that's just par for the course when you're drafting out of the 111. I mean, Puka is a guy who I think is going to be heavily targeted. I just don't think he necessarily has that wide receiver one overall ceiling like a couple of the wide receivers who drafted like directly ahead of him. But structurally, he makes a lot of sense in a tournament like this. He's easy to correlate if we want to go Stafford a little later. So I'm not like that disappointed. Now, Terp, we're pretty much both in agreement of who we should take here, right?
I wanted to take him. I would have took him over Puka if this was like a main event or something. But
yeah,
I mean,
so let's fire him. Let's fire him off right here.
The pick at 202 here for Terp and Greminger is Marvin Harrison. No surprise there. Theo, it's very, very difficult for me to see you in a draft and not end up with Marvin Harrison. You have a ton of him this year.
I draft him all the time. He's a stud. I mean, last time Terp and I were OTC, we went over him versus Drake London. I'm on Marvin Harrison Jr. I've made a statement that I think both he and Malik Nabers both finish as wide receiver ones this year. But Marvin Harrison Jr., I think, has much higher upside than that. I think the potential touchdown in the range of outcomes for him, you're talking about a guy who I think could have double-digit touchdowns right away as a rookie. He's going to command a lot of targets, and he's just an absolute stud. They've been waiting for this. And plus, we've seen it. Kyler Murray, the last time we saw him attached to like a superstar wide receiver when they acquired DeAndre Hopkins early on in Kyler Murray's career, D-Hop's just feasted. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be it's going to become super apparent early in the season why he was being drafted this highly.
The FFPC main event is live. myffpc.com. Take your chance in a $1 million grand prize. Drafts filling all the time. We just had our draft tonight fill up, but don't worry. We have 3 different main event times to choose from tomorrow already that are almost half full, and they're going to fill too. 1 p.m., 7 p.m., 10 p.m. tomorrow, and then, of course, all weekend long. myffpc.com is where to go for that. Take your shot at $1 million grand prize. And if you want to play in any of the other leagues, you won't be waiting long. It is fast-filling frenzy going on at myffpc.com. Fantasy Pros Championship, the best ball tournaments, Empire and Dynasty leagues filling up very fast. myffpc.com, or just scan the QR code right in front of your screen that our producer Matt Deutsch has put up. Want to re-welcome in Anthony Cervino, the real NFL guru on X. How did you come up with that moniker? Were you just looking for something like, I need something that when people see it, they're like, wow, I got to connect with this guy?
It was more, when I decided to get into this, I want a little bit of a splash factor. And that commercial with Andrew Cooper, I'm a big wrestling fan. And I remember when Ric Flair used to call himself the real world's champion.
Yeah.
So that's where that came from.
I got it. Okay. Very cool.
So
there's a lot of crossover between pro wrestling and fantasy football. I'm realizing this.
There is.
I like, for me, I would, when I was a kid, I definitely followed pro wrestling, and then I kind of got out of it. And then I would say my last couple years of high school, and then into like the sort of the attitude era for WWE. Like that was, oh my God, that was what was so great. And then you had the WCW, the NWO thing that was going on. Oh, that was like the golden age for me, even more. And I wish I had the time to keep following it. You know, like I'll still pipe in and watch a pay-per-view, or I'll take in a Raw here and there. But man, I just love it. It's just so great. And I just don't I have 2 kids. I have 3 jobs. So I got to find ways to like weed certain things out of my life. And unfortunately, pro wrestling is one that I cannot dedicate the time.
DVR, you could turn a 3-hour Raw into like 40 minutes.
When I was in high school, we always used to, back when you had video rental stores, you know, me and my buddy, we'd have like an afternoon off of school or a day off of school. We go to Blockbuster or whatever, and we would rent the old like Royal Rumbles.
Yes.
It was just so much fun. So much fun. And then the video games too, like the wrestling video games. I love those as well. So much fun. Anyway, we'll bring it back to fantasy football here. I'm going to put you on the clock, Anthony. All these players I'm about to mention to you are all going very, very close to each other in drafts. Maybe not on top of each other, but all within a few picks. Okay. So if you're on the clock and you're taking a tight end, would you rather draft Dalton Kincaid, or would you rather draft Trey McBride?
Listen, I get a lot of heat for this. I'm all in on Kincaid over McBride this year, and the big reason why. One of these receivers inherited an alpha, or one of these tight ends inherited an alpha. That's Trey McBride, right? He gets Marvin Harrison Jr., Dalton Kincaid. They lose their alpha, 160 target type of guy, and Stephon Diggs. And I think Kincaid is going to be the primary benefactor of no Stephon Diggs, right? They have a nice receiving room, but it almost reminds me like there are a bunch of like 2s and 3s, maybe 4s in Buffalo, where Kincaid has a realistic shot to lead that team in targets. And anytime I can draft a tight end that's number 1 or number 2 in targets, I like to target that guy.
So I think what we need to understand is McBride really took over last year because they didn't have another guy that was really stepping up. Now they have Marvin Harrison, the 4th overall pick of the draft. Buffalo last year had a guy in Stephon Diggs who we knew when he didn't get the ball because he let everybody know about it. That guy's gone, and they replaced him with Keon Coleman and Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Curtis Samuel. Like it's sort of like Moneyball, where they're replacing these big studs in the aggregate. That doesn't necessarily work in pro football. And while on the surface, McBride versus Kincaid might be pretty even, we might get to November and say, oh my God, I can't believe we ever mentioned these 2 guys in the same sentence together. Because Kincaid could be on his way to an all-pro season, and McBride might just be all right.
Yeah. I don't think, and it's not close for me. I'm all in on Kincaid over McBride, and you know, I'll sink or swim with that.
What would you do here at the end of the 4th, early 5th, keeping it on the tight end conversation, Anthony? Would you rather draft Jake Ferguson, or would you rather draft George Kittle? And bear in mind, we spent a good portion of the early part of the show talking about how this Niners offense might stay the same or it might change this year. So we got to weigh that in. Ferguson or Kittle, you're on the clock.
As we stand now, I like Ferguson more. And the reason why I like Ferguson more, no, I don't know if I think the ceiling is high as George Kittle, but he is more consistent. I feel like I know what I'm going to get out of Jake Ferguson week by week, where George Kittle, he's going to give you those 30-point games. He's also going to give you 3-point games. Mm-hmm. Best ball, I have a lot of George Kittle. Redraft, I don't, where it's almost the opposite, where in my redraft leagues, I have a lot of Ferguson and not a lot of George Kittle. Like, Kittle's the guy you can't bench because you have to start him because we don't know when those big pop weeks are coming.
Yeah, and he does have the big pop weeks. That's what makes him so great for best ball, is you don't have to tear your hair out worrying about Kittle starting him this week or not. You just know in best ball, he's going to finish among the leaders in tight ends, top 8 tight end for sure, as long as he stays healthy. Just don't know when it is, when it's going to happen.
And then Ferguson's another guy. I believe he led all tight ends last year in red zone targets, 7th overall in targets at his position. Dallas didn't do anything to upgrade this receiver room. In fact, they lost Gallup. I think they have a little bit too much. I like Jalen Tolbert, but that's who they're putting their eggs in that basket. So Ferguson could be the number 2 in targets in Dallas.
What about, let's go a little bit further into the draft here. 10-11 turn. You need a tight end. Where are you going? Are you going with Cole Kmet from the Bears, or are you going Dalton Schultz from the Texans?
Ooh, I don't have a lot of either. And Kmet, I feel like he's another guy I like in best ball, but that was last year, right? There's a lot more bodies. This is a different situation. They bring in Allen. They draft Odunze. Obviously, you have DJ Moore still here. Where does that leave Cole Kmet in the pecking order for targets, where last year he was realistically like number 2 or 3? And then you have Dalton Schultz in a very similar situation. Dalton Schultz, since his time with the Dallas Cowboys, he's an 85-plus target player, including last year. Now, is he going to see that same volume in a Texans offense where you have Nico, Diggs, Tank Dell? And I believe this is a Texans team that might run more with the Joe Mixon upgrade at running back. So, if I have to take one, I think it's Dalton Schultz, but I don't really like either guy.
Yeah, Bill Hollywood saying good answer to Permar99 in the YouTube chat, saying neither. Neither one of these guys. It's weird because, well, it's not weird, but you look at where these guys are going in the draft, and what I say, 10-11 turn. After that, you have certain guys I do like, Musgrave, Conklin. I think Hunter Henry's interesting as well. But there's just it's such a wasteland. So hopefully, if it comes to that, you already have your tight end on your roster, or maybe 2 of them, given that it's tight end premium in the FFPC. You don't have to necessarily worry yourself about those guys. Okay, enough with the tight ends. Move on to the receivers. Let's talk about a fun one here. Nico Collins, we'll stick with the Texans here. Nico Collins right now as wide receiver 18, or would you rather have Malik Nabers, who's wide receiver 16, who's moved past Nico Collins here? This is in the mid-3rd round. Anthony, who would you rather draft?
I'm more into Nico Collins. Even with Stephon Diggs there, they paid Nico Collins. And, when the Diggs trade happened, there was, is Diggs going to be the one? Diggs is going to be a one-and-done guy here. And does it make logical sense to tell Nico Collins, hey, you're going to take a backseat to Stephon Diggs, then you'll be our guy again? No, it doesn't make sense. They paid him. They told us he is the present and the future. He has the rapport with CJ Stroud already. Now, Nico, the one concern I have with Nico Collins is he was hyper efficient. Only 109 targets last year, 16.2 yards a catch, 8 receiving touchdowns, almost 1,300 yards. Can he maintain that efficiency? That is my one concern with him. But my big issue with Malik Nabers, his name is Daniel Jones. It looks great. It looks great in training camp. But once the pads come on in week 1 and you have that real offensive line blocking for you against a real defensive line, who's going to win? Is Daniel Jones has Daniel Jones ever supported a top 24 receiver? I don't even know.
Yeah.
So Malik Nabers, what I comp him to is like Garrett Wilson his first 2 years with the Jets. Hyper targeted, but has yet to crack the top 30 in points per game because of the quality of those targets. Is that what we get this year out of Malik Nabers? So I'm very afraid of Nabers at cost.
What about T. Higgins or Christian Kirk, to keep it with the receivers? Obviously, Higgins is on a team that features Jamar Chase and apparently Andres Yoshevas, who is getting up a lot of steam right now. The rookie Jermaine Burton too. And then you look at Christian Kirk. Well, no Calvin Ridley on that team, but they did draft Brian Thomas, Evan Engram coming off a 115 catch season or whatever it was, something insane last year. What about Higgins versus Kirk? Who would you rather draft, Anthony?
I feel safer with Christian Kirk. The injury aside from last year, remember 2 years ago, he broke out a little bit with Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville. Now, he doesn't have a high ceiling, but he's a nice high floor stability piece to a fantasy team in redraft leagues, where Higgins, we saw that one big year. He never really lived up to it. And this is still Jamar Chase's offense. And, we bring up that number 3, that slot role. I think Mike Gesicki is going to have a big role in this offense. That's kind of scaring me off of not only T. Higgins, but, Burton and Iosifis. I'm butchering his name. I don't know. I like Gesicki this year. I love Gesicki this year.
Maybe that's one of those tight ends that you focus on. If you skip Komet and you skip Schultz, you can get him. I know Chig Okonkwo was mentioned by Bill Hollywood in the YouTube chat as well. Let's move on here. And here's another fun one. Well, maybe not fun, but painful is maybe a better word for it. Keon Coleman, the rookie receiver from Buffalo, wide receiver 43 right now, going at the end of the 8th round in Fantasy Pros Championship drafts, or DeAndre Hopkins, who's now fallen to go right under Keon Coleman at the 903, wide receiver 43 right now because of the injury. Who would you rather draft at this point, Coleman or Hopkins, Anthony?
I might take some shots on Keon Coleman here. I don't love him as a prospect, but he's just entering a nice situation. There's a need for one of these receivers to step up. I personally think it's going to be Khalil Shakir, but you can take your shots on Keon Coleman. It might not work out. When it comes to DeAndre Hopkins, his age is becoming a concern since he's already banged up. He's 32 years old. Last year, he managed to stay healthy, but the 2 previous years, he was hindered by suspension and injury. Only played in total 19 games, and now he's a year older. And the offense, I think this is a sleeper offense. If it all works, I love Callahan. I love the fact they brought Callahan's father over to get this offensive line on track. But it's all on Will Levis at this point. So if I'm taking my shots on anyone from this offense, it's probably Calvin Ridley. But yeah, Hopkins, I'm just the age worries me, and especially since he's now injured.
And I think the redeeming aspect is he's playing on an offense that wants to throw the ball this year, right? I mean, they want to pump the ball down the field, but at the same time, older, now injured. Keon Coleman, younger guy, obviously rookie, has the opportunity, but that's an offense that might want to run it as much as they can this year too. So opposite way of looking at it there. Speaking of that offense in Buffalo, let's switch to the quarterbacks, Anthony Cervino. Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes? Who would you rather draft right now at the top of the board? This is a great one for Permar because Permar keeps saying neither to all these, but somebody is going to want to draft either Allen or Mahomes this year. On average, they are the top 2 quarterbacks going in the FFPC Fantasy Pros Championship. Who would you rather draft in the mid-4th round? Is it Allen or is it Mahomes?
Listen, I'm on the neither with the Coleman Hopkins one too, but when it comes to this quarterback debate, it is Patrick Mahomes, and I don't think it's close for myself. Mahomes I have him ranked as my quarterback one. Remember, 2 years ago, year 1, without Tyreek Hill, he threw for over 5,000 yards and right around 40 touchdowns. Whatever happened last year happened. This year, Mahomes gets a whole revamped wide receiver room. We talked about Worthy, Marquise Brown. I don't think Rice is getting suspended. Kelsey's healthy. This could be a special year for Patrick Mahomes. Mm-hmm. And again, Josh Allen, he did lose Stephon Diggs. He rushed for 15 touchdowns. That's an outlier season for Josh Allen. He's normally around that 7 to 8 mark. So I think this could be a year where Josh Allen falls back a little bit.
So even though Allen represents the better, not value, but he represents the bigger threat on the ground with his legs over Mahomes, the fact that Mahomes kind of underperformed a little bit last year, given the talent that he had around him, now there should be regression to the mean there from a passing standpoint. And for Allen, if he does have his touchdowns halved, as you said, that you think he might this year, all of a sudden now it's not even that close between Mahomes and Allen. It's Mahomes and every day and twice on Sunday.
Yeah, at least for me. I love Mahomes this year.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to argue with everything that they've put together on that team, adding Brown and adding Worthy, keeping Kelsey on the team, keeping Rice seemingly unsuspended too. So I think there's a lot to like about Kansas City. Here's one that I know you have been posting on X about. I've seen a lot of people posting on X about this matchup here. Kyler Murray or CJ Stroud. Now, Stroud is going in like the mid-7th. Kyler Murray is going at the end of the 7th, early 8th round at that point. So it would be an overdraft or a reach to take Murray over Stroud. But I don't think you see it that way, do you? Who would you rather draft, CJ Stroud or Kyler Murray?
I'm all in on Kyler Murray this year. When we look at the cast of weapons, we talked about them earlier. It's probably the most talented cast of weapons he's ever had. Now, yes, he had Hopkins and Hollywood Brown, but they were rarely on the field together. So the biggest concern I have is Kyler Murray's health. But if he stays healthy, right, we know with a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr., go back to that year one when Hopkins was on this team with Kyler Murray. Hopkins was top 5 in fantasy points per game. So we know Murray can support a top elite receiver. We know Kyler Murray. I wish I had the stats in front of me, but I believe every year outside of his rookie season, he's been top 7 or 8 in points per game. Right around there. So and when it comes to CJ Stroud, I kind of alluded to it when we're talking about Nico Collins. I anticipate this offense passing less. And last year, they weren't exactly the best passing offense. I believe Stroud only had 1 regular season game with 3 touchdown passes. There's just some red flags here I have with CJ Stroud. This is a guy where I view CJ Stroud as an excellent NFL quarterback, but that doesn't always mean you're going to be an excellent fantasy quarterback. My personal rankings, I actually have Stroud as my quarterback 9. I have guys like Dak, Burrow, and Kyler ahead of him.
And I could see that too. I mean, there's something to be said for Stroud overperforming what he should have done last year. And, I know they added Diggs, and I know that what they want to do this year is have Stroud throw the ball. It comes back to kind of what you're talking about. Murray, what he does with his legs, Stroud can't touch that. And it is so valuable to have a running or a dual threat quarterback in fantasy football. These pocket passers are fine. And obviously we just said we like Mahomes better than Josh Allen. But they do have some work to do, Anthony. And unless they have like a really, really awesome season, it's tough to make passing the ball. It's tough to make up what the other guys can do with their legs.
I want to add this wrinkle in here. Now, last year, Stroud was quarterback 11 and then quarterback 7 in points per game. This was also a season last year where guys like Anthony Richardson, Joe Burrow, and Kirk Cousins were all hurt. If they all play, does that drop Stroud closer to maybe instead of a QB 11 finish, maybe he's closer to QB 14 or 15?
Yeah, that's a great point too. And certainly something you need to be wary of. I feel like when, scrolling the Twitterverse, consuming fantasy content, and, listening to podcasts, listening to shows, watching BSN, I think one of the things I've learned, there's a lot of people that are down on CJ Stroud this year. Wow. Again, at his current ADP. Could be a fine player, could have another great season, might not pay off on that ADP.
Yeah.
Gus Edwards, the Los Angeles Charger, formerly of the Baltimore Ravens, or Austin Eckler, the former Los Angeles Charger, now Washington Commander. They're going roughly in the same spot in Fantasy Pros drafts right now. Eckler is at the 9-10, running back 36. Gus Edwards, 10-07. So this one's a little bit different. This is almost a full round separating them. Who would you rather have, Eckler or Gus Edwards?
These aren't great situations either way. I maybe Eckler. I think I'll lean Eckler. I don't have a lot of either one of these guys, and I don't think I will. Like, the issue with Gus Edwards, what made him great in Baltimore was the situation. How much are the Los Angeles Chargers, with their current state, are they going to be in the red zone a lot? Are they going to be in scoring position where Gus Edwards is going to be able to punch it in because he's a great touchdown asset? Like Gus, over 5 yards per carry most of his career. A lot of that had to do with, the enemy defense had to take out Lamar Jackson. He had more open running lanes. And now you have Austin Eckler. He was, again, he was hurt last year. He just did not look like the same player. He was also hyper-targeted. Is he going to see that same type of target volume with the Washington Commanders? You have Brian Robinson there, who is the better runner of the football, especially at this juncture of his career. In fact, I don't believe Austin Eckler was ever a great running back. And Brian Robinson, I believe, is one of the top running backs last year in terms of yards per reception. So he's an underrated pass catcher. I just don't know what Austin Eckler's role is at this point of his career.
Yeah.
I just want to go a little bit more on Eckler, and it seems like I'm being a hater here. But we look at Derrick Henry and Austin Eckler, both around the same age. Derrick Henry lands with a legitimate Super Bowl contender. Austin Eckler lands the Washington Commanders borderline backup money. That tells me a lot on what the NFL sees Austin Eckler and what he has left.
So is that, I mean, that's what you think the NFL is saying. What are you saying, Anthony? Was it injuries that derailed him last year, or is it just simply like this is the end of the line for Eckler?
I think it's the end of the line on Austin Eckler.
And I want to ask you one final question before we go to break. Right now, it's almost halftime in the Lions-Giants game tonight. Eric Gray, 4 carries, 52 yards, including a 48-yarder, 2 touchdowns, 4 catches, 46 yards. Is this his best game he will have all season, including the regular season with the Giants?
Yes.
Okay, There you go.
Yeah.
So the spike weeks may not be there for Eric Gray. I'm just trying to figure out what this would be fantasy points-wise. You're looking at, 98 total yards, so 25.8 in the first half. Again, maybe going up against the Lions backups too. That's something that I'll have to delve deep into after the show is over tonight. The show is not over yet. We have one segment to go. I want to talk with Anthony Cervino from RotoWire about some offenses that he's targeting and fading. We'll talk about the Bears. We'll talk about the Falcons. We'll even talk about the Seahawks. That's coming up. I'm Eric Balkman. He's Anthony Cervino, the real NFL guru on X. This is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network.
Flair once said, if you want to be the man, you got to beat the man. And if you want to be the man or woman this fantasy football season, you got to play over at myffpc.com. That's where all the best fantasy gamers play. That's where all the high stakes gamers play, because they've got the high stakes leagues. They have the best formats. They have the best payouts. It's the place to be. And if you win a FFPC main event or a Fantasy Pros Championship contest over there, you put some serious respect on your name and some money in your pocket. Anyone can win their hometown league, right? You're probably a great fantasy gamer. Prove it. You go out and win an event like this, you can go and put in your Twitter bio or X bio, FFPC main event champion. That means something. That's definitive proof that you're one of the best fantasy gamers in the world. So go over to myffpc.com and use promo code COOP. They'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more. And now you're on your road to greatness, right? You could even do an online draft, or you can go and draft in Las Vegas with the stars. Draft at Planet Hollywood for the FFPC main event. That's where they're all doing it. It's awesome stuff. So get set up now so that you can be a star this year. You can be the man. Just like Ric Flair, you can be a champion. Woo!
Not only do we have the FFPC Best Ball Tournament going on where you can win $300,000, don't forget about the Superflex Best Ball Tournament, $35 to enter, a $100,000 grand prize. That is a doubled grand prize from 2024. Check it out, myffpc.com. And while you're there, check out the Fantasy Pros action we have going on tonight. Drafts will continue to go all the way up until midnight tonight, myffpc.com. And check out the main event while you're there as well. Remember, a pair of $1 million grand prizes in the Fantasy Pros Championship and the FFPC main event this year. Let's rejoin the program here tonight with Anthony Cervino, the real NFL guru on the X from RotoWire.com. Offenses to target and fade. Now, you may not have strong feelings on these offenses, and that's okay. But I think the offenses that we'll be talking about in this segment, Anthony, are going to go a long way into making or breaking people's fantasy seasons. Let's start with the Bears. The talent that surrounds rookie quarterback Caleb Williams is unparalleled to what, at least as I can remember, as far back as I can remember, I've never seen a rookie receiver have this many weapons. Not only that, they went ahead and improved the offensive line. So he should have ample time to throw to DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, Cole Kmet, DeAndre Swift in the backfield. This is a really, really interesting offense this year. But if Caleb Williams isn't up to snuff, then all of a sudden it becomes a fade. Are you targeting or fading the Bears this year? And if it's a combination, if you're targeting some of the players, fading some of the players, that's okay too. How do you feel about the Bears in general?
The only real Chicago Bear I'm really targeting is DJ Moore. Because DJ Moore, we saw him have his breakout year with Justin Fields. And I look at it as, hey, if Caleb Williams, is he an upgrade or at least the same as a thrower as Justin Fields, then I can expect a similar output from DJ Moore. I get that they brought in Keenan Allen, but this is a player there's some injury concerns here. Plus, he's been so target dependent through the last few years with the Chargers. I just don't know if we're going to get value returned on Keenan Allen. The same with Rome Odunze. The future is bright for Odunze, I believe, but he is going to be there. It's almost like I believe Odunze and Keenan Allen are going to cannibalize each other. So the only piece that I have a definitive yes or no on is DJ Moore.
I don't know what it was, 2 waking nightmares over the course of the last 2 weeks. I had it twice. That DJ Moore had a significant preseason injury, and I have a lot of DJ Moore, both in Dynasty and Redraft. It happened twice, and the second time, Anthony, it felt real. Like, okay, this really happened. I had to go to the internet right away. I'm like, okay, he's good. We're good. That's the Bears. Dave Canales is in charge of resurrecting the 1-year career thus far of Bryce Young. He's done it before with Baker Mayfield and Geno Smith. He did it last year, obviously, with Baker Mayfield in Tampa. And this is a hard offense to pin down. Is Mayfield going to be that successful without Canales this year? Is Evans going to be able to do what he's been doing the last several years at his age? I am huge into Chris Godwin this year. I don't think I've had any secret about that. I love the fact that he should be catching a lot more passes, especially if he's playing from the slot. Jalen McMillan is a guy I really like late. Kind of lukewarm on, Rashad White and the backfield there, Bucky Irving. And Baker Mayfield is a fine stab late. But I am kind of bullish on this Tampa offense. Are you fading or targeting these guys this year?
I'm targeting a few of them, right? Like, I know Canales is going to be a big loss, but Baker Mayfield, I feel like he could have finally turned the corner. The weapons are great. Now, what worries me about Mike Evans, remember drafting Mike Evans last year, he was a fantasy football league winner. He was a big-time value because of the production he returned. Now we're drafting him extremely early, where there's more bust potential here. The receiver I want from this wide receiver room is Chris Godwin. Last year, I think it was an outlier for him too. The fact that he was so unproductive. So I'm ready to buy back in on Godwin. I like the report saying that he's going to be playing primarily out of the slot, which is where he belongs. And you bring up Jalen McMillan. There's been a lot of positive camp hype. There hasn't really been a 3 emerged. I know Trey Palmer played a little bit last year, but McMillan, he's not a bad guy to target because if Godwin or Mike Evans was to miss time, Jalen McMillan could be a nice, I guess, plug-and-play flex.
Kind of a rich man's Odell Beckham, right? If that were to happen in Tampa. Yeah, I like McMillan quite a bit. I liked McMillan even before he got drafted by Tampa this year too. For context sake, Mike Evans 309 this year, Chris Godwin 604. That's wide receiver 17 and wide receiver 31 respectively. One of the more polarizing offenses features one of the more polarizing tight ends in the league, and that's the Atlanta Falcons. Gone is the wretched quarterback play that we saw, at least we hope it's gone, that we saw last year. Now enter Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix. You have Arthur Smith gone. Now you have Zach Robinson calling the shots, the offensive coordinator in Atlanta. So much to like about this team. Kyle Pitts, an uber talented tight end. Maybe he'll be unleashed this year. Drake London, who has been drafted super high, continues to go higher. Drake London has risen to wide receiver 10 at the 208. Bijan Robinson, we've seen go first overall. He has an ADP of the 104. And don't forget about Tyler Algier, a player that apparently is going to have a significant role this year in Atlanta, according to Raheem Morris. And somebody who was mentioned in the chat earlier, Darnell Mooney. Rondale Moore is out for the season. We can talk about Ray McLeod as well. I'll let you go wherever you want with this. Tell me if you're targeting or favoring the Falcons offense this year.
Yeah, the Atlanta Falcons are one of my flag plant offenses, one of my flag plant NFL teams over, hammering the over on the team win total. Like I'm going, my bankroll is going to go one way or the other, depending on what this Falcons team does. I'm buying too much in, I feel like, but Kirk Cousins, we know what he's been able to do, going back to Washington, but really recently in Minnesota. Now, what I like is both O'Connell and Zach Robinson come from that same offensive tree. So it should be a similar type of offense for Kirk Cousins. We've seen Cousins not only support elite wide receiver, but we talked about TJ Hawkinson for what Kirk Cousins was able to do for TJ Hawkinson. That makes me buy in on both Pitts and Drake London. Now, I'm the type of person I think I've alluded to this with my fear for Malik Nabers. I will not buy into talented players I like because of situation. So I have not been buying into Pitts since he's been in the NFL or Drake London. I have a ton of both of those players this year because I believe that if there's ever going to be a year where they pop, the right situation, the right OC, the right quarterback is here for them. I have a lot of Darnell Mooney. I just have a lot of this Falcons offense.
Right.
Now, I think quarterback and system, they mean a lot to me, and I think they should mean a lot to fantasy managers. Like you get the rookie hype, the rookie flag planters. I'm going to buy into this guy no matter what. I think that's a mistake a lot of the time.
Does Mooney need an injury to either Robinson, Pitts, or London for him to be start worthy, or could you feel okay flexing him out with all three of those guys healthy? If the matchup's good. Let's say the matchup's good.
I think it has to be a matchup play, but I don't think we're paying a high enough premium for Darnell Mooney yet to feel like I have to make that decision right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's move on and talk about the Las Vegas Raiders. Go from Atlanta to Las Vegas. Devontae Adams and Brock Bowers. Adams, one of the best receivers in fantasy football over the last half decade or so. Hasn't mattered in Green Bay or Las Vegas. He's putting up numbers. Brock Bowers, one of the most highly touted tight end prospects ever to come into the NFL. He's going to be the number one tight end there, at least for fantasy purposes. And then no Josh Jacobs, so it's the Zamir White show. Don't forget about Jacoby Myers, who catches a lot of passes opposite Devontae Adams. You have Dylan Lobby, who's turning heads as a late-round running back stab. Michael Mayer, too. I mean, and I know my co-host on the HSFF Hour, Farrell Elliott, is a big fan of Trey Tucker as a 20th round pick. However, Anthony, and you can't get around this, it kind of all depends on the quarterback this year, and the quarterback play in Las Vegas, even with the addition of Gardner Minshew, it's very underwhelming.
Yeah, I am out, to say the least, on Raiders pass catchers, including Devontae Adams. I might have said this earlier. In the games that Devontae played with I'm drawing a blank on the quarterback, not Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell, under 10 PPR points a game. How do I stomach that when Devontae's still going not as high as he used to, but still fairly high? I think what's going to save Devontae Adams for fantasy managers is if he gets traded. Brock Bowers, I think the community has rookie blinders on. Last year, rookie tight ends like Kincaid and Laporta, they pop. Both of those players were in superior situations. Laporta obviously had Goff, really nice offense. We know what Kincaid had. You have Brock Bowers, he could be a league winner if he was with another team. He's not going to be a league winner with Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew. So like these pass catchers, maybe if he's cheap enough, Jacoby Myers, but the only real Raiders player I want is Zamir White.
And Zamir White is it's a defensive head coach in Antonio Pierce, and I know he wants to play defense. The reports I've seen from the beat writers there say that this defense has improved. It looks pretty good. And if it looks pretty good, then that's pretty good news for Zamir White, I would imagine, too, this year. Zamir White, his ADP right now at 6'11", running back 21. Devontae Adams, I wanted to touch on this real quick. 211 he has fallen to right now as wide receiver 11. When's the last time we saw Devontae Adams out of the first two rounds, Anthony? And it could be this year where he falls to the third round. It's crazy to think about. We won't go much further from Las Vegas to talk about the Los Angeles Rams offense this year. Exciting players on this team. Obviously, Puka Nacua comes out of nowhere last year. Cooper Kupp, it seems like everything we've heard in the preseason, he's on a mission to get back to where he was before when he was winning these, Offensive Player of the Year awards. We touched on Kyron Williams and Blake Corum before. I think we can both agree that running back, that backfield, we don't know who the guy's going to be for the entire season, but we know it should be in good hands. And obviously Matthew Stafford, too, a player that continuously year after year, and it seems like he's got his neck. I know you're dealing with neck issues. It seems like he's got his neck issues behind him as well. And you look at that Rams offense, there is some juicy fantasy goodness there. Let's talk. I want to ask you about Nacua versus Kupp in a second, but let's talk about it as a whole. Is this an offense that you're fading or targeting?
I'm targeting, but I will target the players if they fall to me at the right price. And a big reason why with the Rams, and it's hard. You don't ever want to predict injury, but this whole offense, you can say this about a lot, but like we're paying a premium for Puka Nacua. I think we're paying a ceiling for Nacua. I'm seeing Kupp starting to drive back up draft boards. We know where Kyron's going. Matthew Stafford, he's an injury away from everything going down a drain.
It's true.
Like, and a Stafford injury scares me more than even Joe Burrow went down last year, but some of those players were still competent. Like, I don't know how good this offense is going to be without Matthew Stafford. Yeah, what did they have? Jimmy Garoppolo, and he's already starting with a suspension. Number 2.
Yeah, it's so, and I think you would say that about a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL, or a lot of offenses in the NFL. If the starting quarterback goes down, but at the same time, you think about the premium you're paying for these guys, and that's what I wanted to talk about with you in Nacua versus Kupp, because you're right. Nacua has come down on average in the Fantasy Pros Championship over the last 3 days since the injury, 204. He has slipped to wide receiver 8. Meanwhile, Cooper Kupp has gotten all the way up to 304 as wide receiver 13. I think does this make sense to you? I think there's more safety in Cooper Kupp than Puka Nacua this year, even if Stafford were to go down, or maybe especially if Stafford goes down. Is that the way you see it as well?
I do. And Puka Nacua is a great story. He still is what he is. Like, there's a part of me that thinks if the Rams didn't take him, he maybe goes undrafted. Like, this was the perfect situation, the perfect offensive scheme, the perfect quarterback. Like, I don't know, like the price we're paying for Puka Nacua, is there any more juice to be squeezed out of him? Or are we buying him at his ceiling? Like, to me, there's no other place to go but down.
And I think it's the same thing I said about Aiyuk, right? There should be a buying window for these players, and it hasn't presented itself. Nakua's fallen a little bit, but at the same time, when we're hearing Jordan Rodriguez and all these other beat writers, I think it was Jordan Rodriguez who said this. If it wasn't her, it was one of the other beat writers out there that said the offense is going through Cooper Kupp, at least the passing offense.
Yes.
Like, that is how they're running it. And at that point, are we really taking the receiver who the offense is not running through around ahead of the one he is running through? I understand Kupp's older. I understand he had some injury issues last year. There were significant injury issues. And just because he's healthy now doesn't mean he's going to stay healthy all season. But we use all the information we have at our disposal, Anthony, and that's why I think Kupp is the better play here.
Yes.
I was actually, not that I ever root for injuries, because I don't. But I was actually upset about the Nacua injury, not only for Nacua, but the fact that this is going to drive Cooper Kupp up. And I was kind of already on Cooper Kupp. That's one of the unintended consequences of that. Let's stay in the same division. Seattle. Ryan Grubb, I think, is his name. I always screw up his name, so I'm sure that's not it.
Yeah.
But he's the OC that came over from the University of Washington, staying within the state, going to Seattle to run the offense, or to coordinate the offense there. Geno Smith, I believe, is healthy. He was back at practice. I know there was some sort of injury issue that he had, but I think he's back at practice now. You have Jackson Smith and Jigba. You have DK Metcalf. You have Tyler Lockett on that team. A lot of targets there. The backfield's in really good shape with Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet. And I like the fact that they still have these tackles that were Abe Lucas, and I can't remember the other one. The guys that were on their rookie contracts, I want to say 2 years ago, or maybe it was last year even, and they were awesome. Like, that offensive line was pretty good too. Yeah. There's a lot to like about the Seattle offense. I would say that I'm targeting them, but again, for non-best ball, for managed leagues, it's going to be tough to kind of figure out what the Seattle Seahawks are going to do from week to week with JSN, with Metcalf, and with Lockett. I like Geno Smith late because he's the beneficiary of this, similar to what the Packers have going on. Jordan Love's the beneficiary of that, of having all these talented players. Geno Smith has that as well. Offense as a whole, before we get into the players, target or fade for you, Anthony?
Targeting, but it's player dependent for me. I like what Ryan Grubb could potentially bring. Geno Smith, we did see him get his career back on track. A little bit of a regression last year, but this could be a situation that they're going to let Geno Smith open it up. When it comes to these receivers, DK Metcalf, he's somebody I am perennially out on. I think we're always overdrafting DK Metcalf. And the reason why, Metcalf's second year, he was one of the best fantasy wide receivers. Since that year, he has yet to live up to it. And, I hate to be the guy who's chasing a big year from a few years ago. To me, he's closer to the player that he's been in each of the past 2 or 3 seasons. Lockett, another year older. Like, JSN keeps emerging as the wide receiver I want to buy into. His ADP is still cheap enough to where if it doesn't work out, it's not going to kill my team. But the overall ceiling, if he plays like the first round pedigree that he is, could he potentially pass DK Metcalf as a number 1 here as soon as, I don't know, November, December?
Yeah.
I don't think that's crazy to think.
It's not. It's not at all. And I think as much as people were excited about Smith and Jigba last year, I think that they're wearing that in draft rooms a little bit this year, and it's putting his value down or pushing his ADP down a little bit. And that's another thing that gets me excited about Smith and Jigba, Anthony.
Yeah, and Noah Fant. I know he's dealing with the foot right now, but Noah Fant is another one of those late tight ends that interests me in this offense.
He could get him super late, and obviously he's a pedigreed guy. He's a guy that, again, wasn't cut by the Broncos. He was part of that Russell Wilson trade. Yeah. Tight end 21 at the 1402 right now. I think for best ball, he works out really nicely. But managed leagues, it gets a little bit more dicey. You don't want to be in a situation unless you're faced with injuries or buys where you're having to start Fant. But in a pinch, I think it makes sense. So
they let Disley and Parkinson walk, so there's no more that 3-headed monster type of competition for Noah Fant. And Fant back in 2000 and 2021, 90 target player, tight end 11 and 12 in those 2 seasons in points per game. So he has it in him. Yeah,
he does have it in him, and his prices. Well, I mean, I don't remember where he was going last year, but I want to say his price is almost never been cheaper than it is this year. Final offense we'll talk about tonight, and this is another fun one to talk about. Matt Schauf from Draft Sharks says this all the time, and it's 100% true. Everything the Titans have done in the offseason has told us that they want to pass the ball, they want to be proficient at passing the ball, they want to throw the ball around a lot, whether that's letting Derrick Henry go, whether that's putting all their faith in Will Levis, whether that's signing Calvin Ridley to an astronomical extension. It's all been all about surrounding Levis and making this Titans offense. And I didn't even mention the pass-catching running backs, too. Drafted Tyjae Spears last year. They signed Tony Pollard this year as well. So this is an offense that I know they want to pass the ball. I know they want to do it proficiently. Will they be able to do it enough to really sell all these Titans at their current ADPs? Maybe Hopkins withstanding given the injury. How do you feel about the Titans offense this year? Target or a fade, Anthony?
It's a target. It's a risk, but it's a risk I'm willing to take. I kind of alluded to it earlier. I love Brian Callahan. I love that they brought Bill Callahan over past 2 drafts, upgrading the offensive line with top 10 picks. The front office told us we want to do everything to remove ourselves from the Mike Vrabel era. Let's move on from Henry. Let's turn this thing into a passing offense. And They did just that. It's all on Will Levis now. Callahan in his years in Cincinnati, they were a top 10, even better in team pass plays per game. They're going to want to open it up. If Levis can take any type of step forward, this could be one of the most valuable offenses in fantasy football, and especially in best ball leagues or these tournament style leagues where points are going to matter when it's all said and done.
Will Levis, not for best ball. Let's talk about a managed redraft league. Will Levis, quarterback 22 at the 1608. Would you be okay with him as your backup if you drafted somebody like Hurts, Mahomes, Allen, Jackson, one of those guys?
Yes, if I'm drafting one of those top-end quarterbacks, and I'll even go as far as and say like Anthony Richardson, where I with Richardson, I certainly want a backup that could be able to bring a high ceiling because we know that the injury volatility with Richardson. But yeah, I would not mind Will Levis because if it works, if the stars align, he could really crush his ADP.
He really could, for sure. Boy, that's another. We could easily do 10 minutes on that. How do you attack the quarterback position once you've drafted Anthony Richardson? Because there's a lot of different ways you can go on that. I think some of that would depend upon who's on your team already, too, and how you build it. But That will be a conversation for our next time we do the show. Anthony, before we let you go, tell the listeners, tell the viewers where we can consume more of your content and everything you're doing, not only for yourself, but for the other companies you work for, not limited to, but including RotoWire.
Yeah, over at RotoWire, do weekly shows with Jim Coventry, and I also do some video work for the new RotoWire YouTube channel, which is all fantasy football. So make sure to go subscribe there, and also my over at the FF Faceoff, FFFaceoff.com. I still do my live shows with that team over there. So all of my audio, video content over at RotoWire and the Faceoff Sports Network.
And of course, at the Real NFL Guru on the X is where we want to follow you. I want to thank Anthony Cervino, our producer, Matt Deutsch. We are live at 7 o'clock next Thursday with RotoViz's Dave Caban. He will be my guest for 2 hours. Fantasy Pros Championship, FFPC main event, Superflex Best Ball Tournament, Empire and Dynasty Leagues, all filling up at myffpc.com. Anthony, this was a blast. Let's do it again sometime.
Amazing.
Right?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. For Anthony Cervino and Matt Deutsch, I'm Eric Balkman. This has been the Better Sports Network's High Stakes Fantasy Football Show. We will talk with you again next Thursday. Enjoy the football this weekend, everybody.